This is our first broadcast officially, and we're hoping to do this every other week after our podcast episode drops so we can interact with you, our listeners, and our followers, and talk about the stuff that we talked about on the podcast and get your reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
So type something to let us know that you're here. If
Please.
you're here. Hello, goodbye. I hope that it shows up, that people are chatting with us. I'm going to try to look at Facebook and see what's going on over there. Hello.
Oh, there's someone.
Hello, welcome. Yay. Chat with us. Hello, Case. How are you? Welcome to our Facebook Live. All right. So we're going to talk about Elon Musk's baby name, of course. We have to discuss that for a little bit more. Then we're going to talk about some big trends that we're seeing in 2020. Talk about some Game of Thrones names and Twilight names and how literature and pop culture has an influence on baby names. And through all of this, you're welcome to ask questions. We're both great. Thank you for asking. First, kind of to answer something that was in the podcast episode, we were talking about the name Theus and that the I had the 2 dots over it.
Oh,
so
now you call it the 2 dots.
Well, it has a name in Greek. Okay, so it's called a trema in Greek, and it is nothing to do with the umlaut, I found out. They're 2 separate things. So in Greek, the trema, meaning the 2 dots over any kind of vowel, means that you pronounce it separately from the vowel that comes before it. So it would ordinarily be a diphthong, like Thais, but because the I has the 2 dots over it, the trema, it means you pronounce it separately, Thais.
Okay.
So in German, the umlaut just means that you totally pronounce it differently. So for example, schon, S-C-H-O-N, schon, means already, but if it has an umlaut in German, it's schön, which means pretty.
Yes.
Means pretty.
Right.
So they're 2 different words. So it's schon as opposed to schön. So that means that it's just a pronunciation mark as opposed to Greek, which means you actually emphasize that and say it separately.
Like Dankeschön.
Yeah. And Chloe is a good example. Naive is a good example. So trema versus umlaut. 2 different things.
I think trema is kind of a pretty name.
Yeah. Trema. With an E with the mark on it. Which now I don't know what that's called and I have to go look it up.
There's
accent aigu or something like that in French.
I think aigu, yeah. But there's a trema. Is it an earthquake?
Dad jokes.
I was going to say hand prop to dad.
So, welcome. Wow, my daughter's not even logged in. Thank you, Miranda. But anyway, people can watch this anytime. So whenever you're watching, we welcome you.
Yes.
And thank you for listening to the podcast. This actual episode has been one of our most listened to episodes. It got very good ratings, as number 45 would say. Great ratings. And I think that's because people always tune in when you say the top names of anything, whether it's 2018 or 2019 or 2020. Those have been our biggest episodes to date.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about
An algebra problem?
yes. XA12.
It
Um,
what now, Jennifer, how is that pronounced again, according to the Musk family?
X Ash Archangel, because A12 is the name of a plane that's also called the Archangel, and I don't know what Ash as opposed to AE means, and X is X, but we were saying that Elon Musk, when he was giving his interview to Joe Rogan, looked extremely embarrassed when he was talking about the baby name, and was kind of, intimating that it was all the idea of Grimes, which is his girlfriend. She's a
Man,
pop
she must
singer
be
from Canada.
pretty powerful.
It's like, yes, darling, whatever you say, darling. She's probably screaming in her labor, X, Ash, Archangel A12. Okay, whatever you want. Cleveland Kent Evans made a good point, because we were talking about how in California, you can't put anything but the 26 letters of the alphabet in your baby name officially. But he said, do we know for sure that the baby was born in California? And I cannot say for sure, because she's from Canada. Could have been in Canada. I mean, he's got planes. It could have been anywhere all over the world. It could be on an airplane. Could have been on the A12 for all we know.
Then maybe I would be okay with it.
Okay, yeah, right. But in the state of California, every state has its own naming laws. Some are very old-fashioned and out of date, but in California, they're very strict about being one of the 26 letters of the alphabet. Now, they will accept a dash or an apostrophe if you can prove that it's actually part of the name and not being stupid.
How do you prove not being stupid?
Like A-12 is an airplane. But if you're like hyphenating the surnames, or if you have like Debbie Ann with a hyphen in it, which is more, I guess, culturally acceptable, I don't know.
Then I wouldn't accept Debbie Ann culturally.
I think it's cute. Hey, where'd you go? You dropped out. Help! We lost Mallory. Okay. I'm just telling her we lost her and she needs to come back in again. Okay. I didn't do that on purpose, you guys. I didn't want this to be a solo show. She's my baby sister. Sometimes we get into fights, but I didn't drop her on purpose. So before she comes back, or while she tries to come back, I'm going to describe how Grimes got her pseudonym, because I had to look that up. And it turns out when she signed up for MySpace, or MySpace Music back in the day, you had to indicate like the genre of the music that you produced, and you had to provide 3 different genres, or up to 3. And she put grime in each one because she didn't know what that meant. And that's a genre of music, apparently. That's based in Britain. And so that's how Claire Elise Boucher got her pseudonym of Grimes. Oh, there, she's back. She's back. There she is. Can you talk?
Can I?
I was telling our fans, our one fan
I heard
out there, that I didn't drop you on purpose. Okay. And I talked about how Grimes got her pseudonym. And now let's go beyond this stupid baby name anyway, because we don't even know if it's real. So let's
What do you mean we don't know if it's real?
We don't know if it's the real name on his birth certificate.
Well, maybe it's not on the birth certificate, but it's made reality, a new reality. It's the new normal for baby names.
Yeah, okay. We'll see how many people. We'll see if X Ash A13 is born next. And then maybe I'll accept it. Or maybe it skips from 12 to 14. Who knows? Like elevator buttons.
Like elevator buttons.
So anyway, okay, enough of this. let's move on to the next big trend. Now, so we went over a lot of trends in the names that we calculated were trending for 2020, but there's a big one that stood out, and that is names from mythology, specifically like gods and goddesses, Greek, Roman, and Norse mythology. I'll read the girls that were on the top of the list. Freya for sure, Freya and Freja. We've got Athena, Artemis, Persephone, which I think is pretty, Andromeda, Calliope, Cassandra, who was the priestess of Apollo.
Pretty.
And now, yeah, do you want to talk about the guys?
Well, first I want to say I like Persephone as a name, but everyone would call her Persephone.
Really?
Yes.
Really, it depends where you lived, I guess.
Hey, Persephone!
Where I live up here in the mountains, very isolated. Well, you live in the mountains too. You might say Persephone.
Persephone.
Ooh, we're only seeing your shade there, so
okay. Isn't that a
gorgeous view? But maybe in the cities they understand Persephone. In Greece, it's Persephone. In Europe, they probably know how to say Persephone. They're not stupid Americans. I like Orion, and in Greek mythology, Orion was a giant huntsman whom Zeus placed among the stars in the constellation Orion. And I do
like Orion. I do like Orion. I am not a fan of Apollo, as we know from the podcast.
But why? Why? I'm going to ask you again.
It's too out there for me. I think that, of course, I love Apollo Anton Ono. I mean, who doesn't? I saw him win in 2002. It was the most exciting thing in the universe. So I do respect Apollo Anton Ono, but as far as liking his name, I am just not a fan. It's like naming a baby Zeus.
Okay, well, Odin is popular too. And I can understand why Odin has become popular because it has the same name elements as Owen. It's very similar. And Odin in Norse mythology is the god of, this is one of those that is like almost the god of everything: wisdom, poetry, death, divination, and magic. So Odin is very powerful.
Yes, Odin is very powerful, but it reminds me of Odie from Garfield.
It's kind of an old reference by this.
I'm a little old.
I know we are, but
we don't look at us. We're gorgeous for our late 30s.
Okay. I was born just minutes before Mallory. Let's go on. Orion. I like the name Orion, Orion. I think it's beautiful. We talked about that in our Names from Space episode also. And then there is a goddess of the rainbow named Iris, and I love that name. Iris is the name of my good friend Sandy's daughter. She's, I think, late 30s. Sorry, Iris, if I got that, mid to late 30s. So she was an early Iris, and that name is becoming very popular now because not only does it fit this trend of mythology, but also the flower names, which are becoming huge. We've seen this trend in the last, I'd say, 3 or so years. We've got magnolia, rose, violet, daisy, dahlia. I like dahlia.
Jinx.
Nah, okay. So that's the new next big trend we're seeing is names from mythology. Mark our words. We also talked about the Game of Thrones names because, believe it or not, Theon is trending. And Mal, you talked about that not being like one of the top most, I don't know, dynamic characters.
Oh, he's dynamic. He's just like Job in the sense that everything keeps happening to him and happening to him and happening to him.
Yeah, no spoilers. So Theon is in our top 100, and again, Theon has the same elements as Theo and Theodore, which are also really popular names, and elements that are already familiar to a culture can make names become popular too, even though they're just a little different or they're created. So they're more likely to trend. So then I looked up some other Game of Thrones names. So Tyrion, which is a name I love, and he was a great character too. Tyrion is on 240 name lists. Sansa is on 510 name lists. I thought that was interesting. Cersei, Cersei. Of course, she was a villainess.
No spoilers.
Okay. I think you know that from episode 1. But anyway, that she's on 230 name lists, and Arya with a Y is on 13,230 name lists. So obviously Arya with a Y is the most popular Game of Thrones names. Now, of course, I didn't look up like John, Jon, or Ned because they're not specific to Game of Thrones, but these are names that were definitely catapulted by the book series and television series. Now, speaking of book series, we also talked about...
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Twilight.
Yeah. We've noticed that even on the 2020 charts, the Twilight names are still super popular. Esme, Jasper, Emmett, of course, is right up there. Bella, Isabella, and even Cullen, the surname. And you know what I was thinking? You know how old-fashioned names started coming into style about 10 years ago?
Ooh, maybe you're right.
I wonder if it came from Twilight because the vampires were 100 years old.
Oh, okay.
And that's why, so that's why they had the turn of the 20th century names. And it was right about that time when those old-fashioned names started coming into style. And of course, there was Alice and Esme, and Rosalie.
Yeah, don't forget Rosalie. Rosalie was 63 on our list.
Yeah. So I wonder if that was the catalyst for it, because Twilight names are still having an influence on baby naming, which is crazy. We mentioned in the podcast that the books came out in 2008, and then the movies followed after that. So I think that's really cool. And we are planning an episode all about Twilight names to coincide with the release of the new book in the series, which is coming out in August.
Yay,
so
August 4th.
Stay tuned for that.
It's my birthday present.
I guess so. I'll have to get it for you for your birthday.
Thank you. Better.
So that's it, you guys. Do you have anything to say, Mel? Or are you just sitting there looking gorgeous?
I am looking gorgeous. Look at me. You would never know I'm 39.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think that it was really interesting to see the Twilight names get as high as they were. I agree with that. They just keep enduring, and that is so strange. But I think you had a really good point that 100 years ago they did become more popular, or they were more popular. I just want to highlight some of the names that I liked from our name list. And of course, it's Luna, because I am an influencer. It went from 16 to 7. So our loyal fan base, no, don't do ba 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 to Luna.
Well, we have one thumbs down and one thumbs up from you. Like Siskel and Ebert.
That's right. I think that Sofia is a gorgeous name, and I'm glad it went from 40 to 16.
Yeah, that was up there, and then it dropped a little, and now it's coming back into style, believe it or not. Yeah.
Yes. And we're also seeing a resurgence of the Hawaiian names, Kailani and Leilani. Some names that I don't
wonder why
like.
that is. Do we have a pop culture reference for Hawaiian names other than Moana?
Oh, I'm sure there's more than Moana.
Hawaii Five-O, but that's a pretty old TV show by now. I mean,
There's
I
a
know they had a
remake.
reboot. I know, but it's still like 5 years old.
Well, what I
Hi,
would like.
Jenny. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Jenny. I think that I don't know about Moana. It's not Moana, but
It's
who
got to
is?
be something else.
Yeah, I don't know either. Look, I did a hair flip. Ooh.
Okay.
Like Galinda. Anyone get that reference? Anyway, that's a name, Galinda, which was the original name of Glinda, the Good Witch. I love the name Stella. I love the name Fiona. Those were 61 and 65 respectively. Again, I don't like any name that I can't pronounce because what are other people going to do when they see your name? I mean, you can teach them. I know
I think you can teach them.
But everyone will get it wrong. And again, like Saoirse Ronan?
Saoirse. It's Saoirse.
Saoirse Ronan. And then
us
you
with
guys
Irish names. I know. Aoife. Aiofe. Aoife.
Oof.
Anyway, you're being racist.
I'm not being racist. I'm just saying I don't know how to pronounce the name. Oof.
It's Aoife. Can you say Aoife?
Aoife.
So Case asked, why do you think gender neutral names are becoming so popular now? And they are. That was a question also that was asked by a journalist that I spoke to on yesterday. And I think like back in our day when we were growing up in the 60s, I mean the 80s.
Speak for yourself.
Like it was a stigma to have traits. Gender was so binary back then, and we've acknowledged the fact that now it's there's a spectrum, and that it's fluid. And there's not as much of a stigma to have traits of the other gender or of any other gender.
Right.
Whereas back in our day, I remember I was on the playground and some kid asked me my name and I said, Jenny, and they said, Jimmy, that's a boy's name. And I was like so mortified that he thought that my name was Jimmy. Like I remember being like, no, trying to correct him. It's Jenny. It's Jenny. It's a girl's name, because it was a stigma back then. And I think our culture has changed now. Definitely. I also think it came out of the women's movement to kind of put girls on more of an equal footing as boys. They talked about names on resumes and things like that.
Yes, maybe you're right, but I think it just became trendy also. Yeah. I mean, yes, I think there was the women's movement, and I think that there was...
it might not have been conscious.
Right.
But I think just to more empower the girls, because boys' names are thought of as stronger, unfortunately.
Well,
but now it's crossing.
Why did Mom name me Mallory? That's a gender neutral name.
No, it was a celebrity baby name.
Right, but she heard it and she had the choice to use it or not.
And it also had the E ending, which was more feminine at the time. Like Ashley.
Mallory was male all the way up until the 60s. And I say male
all the way up
only.
Until Family Ties almost.
Right, but I was...
But you predated that.
I predated, Family Ties. Has anyone noticed where Jennifer and Mallory like Family Ties?
We talked about that.
Yes. Well, I'm saying it again.
That was so weird though when the show came out, only because there were no Mallorys out there other than you. And so when the show came out and the characters were both Jennifer and Mallory, it was just really bizarre.
I think someone knew us.
Yeah, I know. I think somebody was peeping into our lives.
Okay. We have a question. Can you say names like Sybil and Blanche coming back into style anytime soon? I definitely can see Sybil coming into style. First of all, it's a beautiful name, and the stigma is past what it used to be, which was a movie in the 70s, a movie in the 70s about... It was a
book and a mini series about...
about a woman with what used to be called split personalities, now called dissociative identity disorder.
Right. So Sybil was completely identified with that, and so it dropped off the charts. But I don't think that reference is really relevant anymore, unless they do a remake. But also there's not as much of a stigma anymore, like you were saying,
Exactly. Jennifer, do you want to take the question about us missing Baby Musk? Yes, what? You did. Yes, Kelly, you did miss the part about Kelly. Baby Musk. Do you have any comments, Kelly, that we can incorporate into the cast?
Okay, so Allie says, here we go. Do you think names with lots of nicknames are more popular than names with no or few nicknames? Oh. Well, considering that nicknames are now being used as given names, something that I don't particularly agree with, yes, because parents do, when they write us to ask about names, almost always they include information about nicknames. Like, we want to call him or her or whatever, Allie, as opposed, should we give it a nickname this? Should we give it a nickname that? So, yeah, I think parents are really considering nicknames now. And one thing that we've always said about nicknames, like we called my daughter Mimi since she was in my stomach, because I didn't want her to be called Randy. Her name's Miranda, or Mandy or Mindy. So I specifically called her Mimi as a nickname, but she grew out of it. And when she was done being Mimi, then that was it. She was Miranda. So, at a certain point, it doesn't matter what you call them, because they're going to decide what they want to be called.
Right. And I was kind of the opposite. I named my daughter Veronica and always called her Veronica or Vivi or something based on the V. And then in middle school, she decided she would be Ronnie, R-O-N-I, a name that we had never used as a nickname for her. And that has stuck into her 20s. No one knows her as Veronica when I go to any town she lives in, which has been many.
I know it's hard for me to call her Ronnie, because I know her as Vivi or V, because we all called her just V. So we had Vivi and Mimi, which we thought was so adorable.
Of course.
And then they both grew out of them. Okay, we have another question from Jenny. Sorry, we're getting used to technology. Is it okay not to tell family members and friends what you're going to name your baby? So no one can say it's a dumb name or I don't like that. Absolutely.
I don't see any problem with that. That is perfect. Yeah. In fact, I think, I don't remember. In some cultures, you just don't do it.
Yeah. Well, I know in the Jewish culture, you don't
get presents.
I think historical, you don't set up the nursery. You're not supposed to get presents. Everything happens after the baby's born. It's like bad luck,
It's kinahora, yeah.
Right. But I say, if you're getting really negative feedback, I think a lot of people also get really confused when they get too much input and they start doubting their own choices. So absolutely, it's between you or you and your partner, what you decide to name the baby, and you can keep it a secret. Also the thing that I've noticed is that people are more likely to diss your baby name before the baby's born, but once the baby is born and they see its beautiful face, they're less likely to criticize the name. So yeah, keep it private.
Also, from personal experience, people will come up to me ahead of time and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's awful. Don't name your baby that. And then they're like, here's my baby, Ufa. And I say, it's a lovely name.
Of course. Yeah. What are you going to say at that point?
It's lovely face. So shut them up that way. Just tell them after.
Yeah. Tell them after.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for us? Okay. So, again, we don't know when the U.S. Social Security list is coming out. They're not letting anyone know. What I think is really interesting, though, and I want to say this as an aside, that the notice on their website says, in order to honor families with COVID-19 and coronavirus, we're not going to release the list. And I thought, well, that's a strange way of saying it. Like, how is that honoring families with the virus. Like, just say you're overloaded with work now and you can't get the list out, right?
Like, I'm trying to figure that out. What could it be? Maybe that parents want to know what it is, but they don't want to focus on baby naming right now. I don't really understand.
No, I think they must be behind on the Social Security applications or something.
Oh,
maybe. I don't know. I don't know. It has nothing to do with honoring families that have COVID. It was just a really strange way to put the statement on why they're not tabulating the names.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all affected by COVID, and everyone, please stay inside. You can see we're inside. We're not walking outside. Be safe. That's the most important thing.
We have another question from Allie. She says, have either of you had a name stolen or personally dealt with name stealing? Well, we both have just one daughter.
Yeah, and Veronica was such a rare name that no one ever even got close. I don't meet a lot of Veronicas. And if I do, let's see, how many, I know 2 Veronicas where I live now. So I guess I know a little more now that are younger. But when I named Veronica, there were not a lot of Veronicas around.
Yeah.
I thought there'd be more.
I have an experience about name stealing my name within the family. So when I was about 10 or so, we had an aunt who married our uncle, Chuck Moss, and her name was Fern. And she didn't like Fern Moss because it was so leafy, she says. They were both plants. So she decided, without even asking me, that she was changing her name to Jennifer. And she changed her name to Jennifer Moss. And I was really upset that not only did she do it, but she didn't even ask me. She was like, yeah, I'm going to be Jennifer Moss. And so for the next maybe 20 years until they were divorced, she went by Jennifer Moss, and a little after that too. And at one point when I was an adult, I kind of confronted her on that. And she's like, yeah, I didn't even realize.
I don't think you can own a name. I disagree with you.
Within a family? What if you decided to change your name to Miranda Mendelsohn? Just think about that.
I am almost as gorgeous as Miranda Mendelsohn.
But anyway, it's weird, isn't it? Isn't it weird, though?
It is weird, but she was already Moss, and you do not have the
copyright.
Copyright of the name Jennifer, and no one owns a name. So my point is, let me talk.
Sister.
Look at her. My point is that anyone can name anyone anything, as we know from Baby Musk. But the point is that we can name our children anything. It doesn't matter what your cousin names her baby. It doesn't matter what your person in your yoga studio names their baby.
Yeah, but
you can name your baby anything.
But there is I don't know, etiquette. I think there's naming etiquette within a family for sure.
There is naming etiquette, but that doesn't mean everybody has to be polite.
Okay. I'm just saying how I felt. That's all. So that was my experience.
That's okay.
I'm changing my name to Mallory Moscat. So
please do. Then I'll change my name to Ufa.
Okay. Eva. All right, guys. One more question. We'll take one more from Allie. And it is, what do you think of similar nicknames? Izzy and Lizzie.
Well, we were Mimi and...
Yeah, Mimi and Vivi. I think as long as they're not twins, because that's too twinny-winny. So I'd say it'd be okay.
I think the only problem with Izzy and Lizzie specifically is that you might not hear it that well, and you might think someone's calling the wrong name.
Yeah.
But actually, I think Izzy and Lizzie is pretty damn cute.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll do this again in 2 weeks after our next episode.
We'll be better next time.
Make sure you subscribe.
Please do.
We love you. Bye-bye.